On this episode of Left Off the Map, we're going to one of the most visited places in Tasmania, Bay of Fires. We're going to walk in there and meet someone very special. This person probably knows more about Tasmania and the tourism industry here than any other person in Tasmania. He was the Premier of the state for a long period of time, and he was also the Minister for Tourism. So we're going to catch up with Will Hodgman, and he's going to talk about his favourite dish, why he loves the East Coast and why he loves Tasmania and why tourism is doing so well. And his favourite dish, we couldn't do it on the day because we didn't have duck fat and we didn't have access to an oven, was duck fat potatoes. So we're going to show you how to make fantastic duck fat potatoes before we go and see the ex-Premier. I've got some potatoes here that I've peeled. Now, normally I would advise you not to peel vegetables because it's the skin that has all the nutrients. The skin is the part that's in contact with the soil. The soil is where all the nutrients live, so the skin is going to be higher in nutrients than anything else. But because we want to bring starch out of the potato to make them nice and crispy, you've got to peel that skin off to bleed some starch out. So I've got our potatoes that I've peeled. And we always talk about waxy potatoes and starchy potatoes. They say starchy potatoes are best for things like this. And you should be able to tell there's a slight difference between a waxy potato and a starchy potato in the colour. So the starchy one is this one, and it's whiter. It's going to be drier and there's going to be a lot of starch come out of it when we cook it. This one's waxy. It's more yellow. It's going to have a waxier mouthfeel with not as much starch. So there's the difference. So we'll be able to see the different outcome from using a starchy potato to a waxy potato. Anything that grows in the ground, you should start in cold water. So carrots, potatoes, beets, anything like that, start it in cold water, then bring the temperature in and then cook it. There's also a saying that anything that grows in the dark, you should cook in the dark. So again, things that are grown underground, you should put a lid on. But it's all going to cook the same, I think. I need some salt in with my potatoes, season my water. Bring that up to the boil and cook until soft. And then the biggest tip I can give you will be the next thing that we do. Once we drain all that water off, I'm going to show you how you end up with the best duck fat potatoes you'll ever eat. They've been cooking for about half an hour. All I want to be able to do is poke a knife into them like that so that they're cooked all the way through. We've got lots of starch on the outside. I'm going to strain this off. And all that steam is good. We want these to dry off as much as they can. We want to get as much water out of them as possible. So let all that steam come off. Let it go, let it go, let it go. Once we've got a lot of steam off there, I'm going to put them back into the pot and shake it vigorously to try and, again, break up all the starch on the outside of the potato because that's the bit that's going to go nice and crispy. It's like almost like battering your potato in potato starch. So we've got to shake it vigorously to break all of that up once we get all this water out. So tip them back into their pot. Try not to take any moisture with it. A good pinch of salt. Bring some more of that steam, that moisture out of the potato. And season the potato at the same time. And then shake. They're bouncing around inside, getting all fluffy. And they're crushed on the outside and that starch is coating the outside of the potato. That's what we want to happen. Still got steam coming off, they're still drying out. So you've got two factors at play. One, with the steam coming off, it means you're going to have a light, fluffy potato on the inside. And two, breaking up all that starch means you'll have a crunchy potato on the outside. So that perfect potato that you're after, crunchy outside, fluffy on the inside, this is how you create it. So just let them keep steaming. Once we've got rid of all the steam, so all that moisture, I'm going to put them into this roasting tray with our duck fat and pop them into an oven at about 190 degrees. Now, it's cooked, so all you're after now is for them to be crunchy. So leave them in there until they're nice and crunchy. All right, the last little bits of steam coming off. We get a little bit more steam come off once we spread them out a bit. Get all of our potatoes out. One left in there. So they should all be nice and sticky. Spread them all out. Don't want potatoes laying on top of each other here. You want them to be nicely spread. Duck fat. That's a blowtorch. So get your duck fat, place it on top. Don't be sort of afraid to use lots. Another pinch of salt. Once this duck fat melts, we'll bring it out and give it another shake and see whether we've got enough in there. So a couple of tablespoons of duck fat into our oven. In about 5 minutes time, I'll get out and mix all of that around so that our duck fat's evenly spread all over the top of our potatoes. And then, like I said, you've got until they're golden brown. It might take 30 minutes, it might take 45 minutes. Once they come out again, I'm gonna put some rosemary, another little pinch of salt, and then they're ready to eat.
The thing, we've got so many visitors wanting to come here and explore the state, we've got to find places to put them. So we're getting a lot of hotels built now, which is great. A lot of investment in the state, but also a lot of people are making their homes and their shacks available, which doesn't need to be taken around. Now they'll do it themselves. And they'll get in a car and...
Yeah, I think that's a great way to see the state too, just jump in a car and drive with no real itinerary or plan.
Yeah.
This is how you start your journey into the Bay of Fires Lodge.
Is that right? So
Every guest, they arrive, you can see all of the foot spas set up. They take their shoes off and they relax. So that's the plan for us. Do you get many opportunities to just relax?
My mum put a guitar in my hands.
Yeah, that's a good decision.
Let me loose in the kitchen when I was quite young.
Yeah, two creative outlets.
Yeah,
I think it's important.
They help me relax, so...
I've heard about you. I've never cooked with you, but I've heard about your cooking for years.
A very enthusiastic amateur, but I love it.
So I'm going to do my best to create a dish that... is it one of your favourites?
It doesn't sound very adventurous, I know, but we're going to make it special. I can feel it.
Steak, duck fat potatoes, Brussels sprouts with bacon.
Yeah.
And a cafe de Paris butter. Which I think if you're one of those people who can't make sauces, a sauce is one of those things that there's a real alchemy in being able to make a good finishing sauce. A compound butter, which is just butter with lots of flavour in it, is the easiest way to go. Put it on top of anything and you've got yourself a sauce, I guess. So we're going to make the butter first. So I've cheated a little bit by getting a compound butter already, so the herb and garlic butter from Ashgrove.
Yes.
So we've got half of the work has been done for us. So this butter, if you couldn't be bothered going through the process of making a compound butter, it has heaps of flavour in it already. So they make this in-house at Ashgrove, just outside of Deloraine, and they do a fantastic job. But we're going to pimp it up a little bit by adding some white anchovies, some capers, some chives, Dijon mustard, and a little bit of spice to it. So it'll have probably more flavour than we want in the end. And the compound butter's good because they just sit in the fridge and you can grab them whenever you want them. You can put them on sourdough, you can put them on toast, you can put them on top of a steak, you can put them over the top of steamed veggies, do whatever you want with them, and they'll keep forever. So I'll just roughly chop this, then pop it into our little food processor. So what's normally being cooked at the Hodgman household if you're in the kitchen?
Well, I like to chance my arm. I'll do whatever I feel like.
Are you one of those cooks where you'll just sort of... You'll make it up as you go?
Yeah, people see me wandering around supermarkets or visiting my local providor.
How long can you spend in a supermarket?
Well, as long as it takes. They say, haven't you got better things to do? But I tell people I have to eat, and it's therapy. I love to cook.
White anchovies, about a tablespoon and a half of capers, some fresh parsley.
Yeah.
Lid on. So that is your compound butter basically done. So you can scoop this out, put it into some cling film, roll it up and put it in the fridge, and then you've got it whenever you need it. You can see probably 50 to 50 flavour ingredients, the herbs, the anchovies, the capers to the butter. So you're going to get lots and lots and lots of flavour from a small amount on there. When you've cooked potatoes before, you would have noticed that white starch that sits on the outside. You want that. That's the thing that when you put them in oil and cook them at a high temperature, it goes crispy.
So don't rinse them?
Don't rinse them out. No, keep as much starch on as you can. And we're even going to slightly bash our potatoes to try and break down cell walls to release more starch to create more crunch. So potatoes, chop them, pop them into your water. You want to parboil these, so just until they're tender enough that a knife goes in easily, and then we'll strain them and shake them in the pan.
Now, it may be because we've started from scratch, but you don't chuck them into fast boiling water.
No, cold water.
Sitting next to Jeremy Rockcliffe in Parliament for 16 years, pretty much, and he's a potato farmer. You would have thought I'd known by now.
Pick that up off him. He's, can Jeremy cook?
No.
He can't?
No.
So once you've strained them, pop them back into your pot, which is hot, because that'll help dry them out. I'll swap with you.
Yeah.
And just give them a pretty severe shake.
I don't want to lose any.
So yeah, you're getting all the starch on the outside now. We'll let that sit till it cools, and then we're just going to straight into some duck fat and fry them off. And they'll be ready to go. So while we wait for them, we'll start getting our steaks ready. I feel it. Is that your favourite cut?
Yep.
It is?
Without doubt.
We're going to cook it on charcoal, so that's going to add some flavour. So I'll drizzle some oil on, and you're going to be in charge of cooking our steaks. Are you someone who turns constantly, or do you leave?
No, only the thinnest steak after I watched one of your shows with Brooksy when you did it. And what about searing on the sides? That technique, which I've seen as well.
So it depends on, something like a porterhouse has that fat on the outside, so you need to render that. So searing on the side, I think, is important there. Again, with a knife fillet, because there's nothing around the outside that needs to be cooked out or rendered out, I would leave it. But it's personal preference. If you want more of that crust, then the more that you can get in contact with the heat, the more you will develop that crust. So our version of steak and potatoes, cooked in an iconic place with an iconic person with iconic produce. That's what this show's all about. So
10 out of 10, well done.
Do you want to eat?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
You mind if we join you?
That was Will Hodgman, and he was a fantastic Premier and a wonderful Minister for Tourism. Potatoes are still cooking. I'm going to show you a great combination for these potatoes, which is beer-battered fish. So I've got beer. I'm going to show you how to make what I think is the best beer batter going around. Self-raising flour. Make sure you get self-raising flour. I'll tell you why in a minute. So a little bit of self-raising flour. Again, you don't really need to measure it. You're just after a consistency. And as you probably know with me, I don't measure a lot of things. Corn flour, so it doesn't get too heavy. You want it to be a nice light batter. Baking powder. And that really is the trick, the baking powder and the self-raising flour. Good pinch of salt. So baking powder is already in self-raising flour. So self-raising flour has a raising agent already in it. Then by adding the baking powder reacts under heat. So once you get enough heat to create the reaction that baking powder creates, and that's what gives it the bubbles, because you're putting it into hot oil, you end up with a much lighter, fluffier batter if you add in the baking powder. And beer. Whisk in your flour and beer. And you're after, I mean, everyone has their own preference for how thick their batter is going to be. I don't want it to be super thick. I want it to be more of a sort of tempura-ish texture. So about thick and cream, pancake sort of batter is the consistency that I want. So that's pretty good. And then this is pink ling. You want a good fish and chip fish, which pink ling's fantastic, anything that's nice and thick. I reckon the best fish and chip fish in the world is flathead. A little bit of flour on our fish, and this is because we need something for our batter to stick to. If we just try and put the batter on there now, it will not stick to the fish. As we cook it, it'll just slide off. So give that a good coating. And now I want pieces of fish that are about uniform in thickness. So I'm going to take this belly portion off. And then I'm going to create goujons. So little strips. Like that. So we've got 3 little strips and then cut that into. So woks are fantastic for cooking this sort of thing. They're a great conductor of heat. They've got a nice thin metal that makes up a wok, so it transfers heat quickly, but also loses heat quickly. So if you need to cool the oil down, as soon as you turn the gas off or lower the gas, it'll cool down nice and quickly. Alrighty, fish into our batter. Good to go. Let's wait for our oil to heat up. I'm just going to drop a little bit of flour into our oil. If it bubbles, it means it's hot enough. A bit of flour. Yep, so you've got that little bubble. You can see that batter sticks because of the flour that's on there. These two are a bit thinner, so we'll cook them together. If you're cooking in batches, try and cook things that are a similar size. So these are 2 thick portions, goujons. These are smaller ones. So I'm going to cook these 2 together and then I'll cook these 3 together. And almost like you would cook a schnitzel. So on one side and then turn them over and cook the other side until they're nice and golden. So you've got that little bubble. Of our first piece in. I'm going to cook, I've only got a little bit of oil in there. So I'm going to cook 2 at a time. I'm going to cook them in batches. So these will take 1.5 minutes probably each side, and then we'll flip them over. The little bits you can see coming off of that batter, they're really, really, really yummy. So you can hold on to them and they're like a little textural crunch on top. Well, those extra little bit of texture and crunch for the fish. So try and keep that together if you can. So about 1.5 minutes on each side, flip them over. And then out onto some paper towel. And they'll almost be ready at the exact same time as our duck fat potatoes are ready. And we're very close. So our fish is done. We've got those 2 little belly pieces and 2 big pieces. Our potatoes, duck fat potatoes, should be done as well. Look at that. Nice and crunchy. And you can tell they're going to be nice and fluffy on the inside. So duck fat potatoes and a great piece of beer battered fish. This is something that you can definitely eat at Bay of Fires. You can sit out on that deck with a beer, some beer battered fish, some duck fat potatoes, a little bit of mayonnaise or your homemade tartare. Sit there and just watch that beach, watch the waves roll in and enjoy the best that Tasmania has to offer.